Ethan Reed leaned back against the cold concrete wall of the subway station, breathing heavily. His pulse thrummed in his ears, and his fingers trembled with leftover energy from whatever had just happened. Around him, the station was silent, frozen in an eerie stillness. The bustling crowd that had filled the platform moments before was now motionless, as if caught in a photograph. He took a shaky step forward, his footfalls echoing in the silence. A woman in a business suit stood mid-stride, her foot hovering just above the ground, her eyes wide with alarm frozen on her face. A young boy with a baseball cap was suspended in mid-jump, his hand outstretched toward a balloon drifting just out of reach. Ethan swallowed hard, a chill crawling down his spine. What the hell had just happened? As he took another tentative step, a strange pressure released, and sound rushed back into the world. The hum of fluorescent lights, the screech of a distant train, the chatter of commuters, it all crashed over him, and the crowd resumed its movement as if nothing had happened. The woman completed her step, the boy landed, and the balloon floated upward, unhindered. Ethan blinked, trying to steady his breathing. Nobody seemed to notice the lapse in time, as if it hadn't happened at all. He squeezed his eyes shut, his mind racing. This wasn't the first time he'd experienced something strange. Over the past few weeks, he'd felt occasional blips, brief moments when time seemed to bend or slow around him, but nothing like this. He brushed his hands over his face, trying to ground himself. Maybe he was just exhausted, sleep-deprived from his grueling shifts at the hospital. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. The sound of his phone buzzing jolted him back to reality. He pulled it from his pocket, grateful for the distraction, and saw a text from his best friend, Liam Torres, Liam ******, hey man, where you at? Don't tell me you bailed again, Ethan sighed, tapping out a quick reply. He hadn't bailed intentionally. He'd just gotten a little sidetracked. Later that night, Ethan found himself nursing a beer at their usual dive bar, waiting for Liam to arrive. The dim lights and faded vinyl seats brought a strange sense of comfort, grounding him after the bizarre incident in the subway. So, you're alive? Liam's familiar voice came from behind him. Ethan looked up, managing a weak smile as Liam slid into the booth across from him. With his military-cut hair and broad shoulders, Liam looked like he belonged in a battlefield rather than a dive bar. But his easy grin and relaxed demeanor made him one of the few people Ethan felt he could trust. Barely, Ethan replied, his voice tinged with sarcasm. Long day. Yeah. You look like you've seen a ghost. Liam flagged down the bartender, ordering a beer. Or maybe 3. Ethan hesitated, the words forming on his lips before he pushed them back. How could he explain what he'd experienced? Just work stuff. You know how it is. Right. Liam eyed him suspiciously. Well, I've got a new job coming up. A security gig, out near the old research labs. Pays well, and it'll keep me from going stir-crazy. Ethan nodded absently, his mind drifting back to the frozen subway station, to the woman mid-step and the boy mid-jump. The details haunted him, lingering at the edges of his mind. Finally, unable to hold it in any longer, he leaned forward, lowering his voice. Something weird happened today, Liam. Liam raised an eyebrow, waiting for him to continue. Ethan took a deep breath. I was at the subway station, and I don't know, time just stopped. For a second, Liam's expression was blank, then he broke into laughter, slapping the table. Man, you need to cut down on the late shifts. You're starting to sound like one of those sci-fi conspiracy nuts. I'm serious, Liam, Ethan insisted, his voice steady. Everything stopped. People, sounds, Everything was frozen, just for a few seconds. And it's happened before, but not like that. The laughter faded from Liam's face, replaced by a look of genuine concern. "You're not messing with me, are you?" Ethan shook his head, his hands clenching into fists. "I don't know what's happening to me, Liam. But whatever it is, it's getting stronger." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of Ethan's confession settling between them. Finally, Liam cleared his throat, glancing around the bar as if to make sure no one was listening. "Look," he said quietly, "I know a guy. Used to work with some scientists in genetics. Rumor has it, they were doing experiments, something about enhancing human abilities. Maybe he can help you figure this out." Ethan's heart pounded. Part of him wanted to brush it off as another conspiracy theory, but another part, the part that had felt the pulse of energy freezing the world around him, knew there might be a grain of truth. "All right," he said, his voice barely more than a whisper. "Let's meet him." The next day, Ethan found himself outside an unassuming building on the outskirts of town. It looked like an abandoned warehouse, its windows cracked and covered in grime. But inside, the air buzzed with a strange energy, and Ethan's skin prickled with anticipation. Liam led him down a dark hallway until they reached a small, cluttered office. Behind the desk sat an older man with graying hair and sharp, calculating eyes. He looked up as they entered, and a sly smile spread across his face. "You must be Ethan," he said, his voice smooth and uncomfortably calm. "I've heard about your situation." Ethan glanced at Liam, who gave him a reassuring nod. "Yeah, that's me." "And you are?" "Dr. Cale Voss," the man replied, extending a hand. Ethan shook it hesitantly, feeling a faint jolt of energy from the man's grip. "I believe you're here to understand the changes you're experiencing." Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on Voss. "I don't understand what's happening to me. But I know it's not normal." Voss leaned back in his chair, folding his hands in his lap. "You're right, it's not normal. But it's not entirely unexpected, either. You see, for years, we've been exploring the potential of human evolution, experimenting with genetic modifications. Some of these changes were intended to be subtle, undetectable." Ethan's mind raced, piecing together the implications of Voss's words. "So, you did this to me? To all of us?" "Not directly," Voss replied, his tone dismissive. "Our methods involved the introduction of alien genetic material, altering the very building blocks of human DNA. In essence, we were simply guiding the natural course of evolution." "Guiding?" Ethan echoed, his voice thick with disbelief. "You're talking about manipulating us like lab rats." Voss shrugged, unfazed. "Wouldn't you say humans have done the same to other species? We're only expediting what would happen over millennia. And those like you, the gifted, the evolved, are proof of our success." Ethan's stomach churned with anger and disgust, but he kept his expression steady. "And what's the endgame here? Why go through all this trouble?" A faint smile played on Voss's lips, his eyes gleaming with a cold, detached amusement. "Because humanity is flawed, Ethan. And if left unchecked, your species will destroy itself. We're here to ensure a better path, a world where evolved humans serve as leaders, guiding the rest." "Leaders?" Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, a mix of disbelief and horror. "You're talking about controlling us." "Call it guidance, if you prefer," Voss replied, his tone almost patronizing. "You and the others have a choice. Embrace your evolution, or," he trailed off, his gaze icy and unyielding. Ethan clenched his fists, feeling the faint hum of energy beneath his skin. He was ready to lash out, to make a stand, but Liam's hand on his shoulder held him back. "Let's go," Liam said quietly, steering him out of the office. Outside, Ethan's mind spun with anger and fear. His powers, his very identity, it was all part of some grand alien experiment. He felt like a pawn, trapped in a game he didn't understand, his life no longer his own. But as he walked alongside Liam, a resolve settled over him. He wasn't alone. Others were out there, people like him, caught in the same web of lies and manipulation. "We need to find them," he said, his voice steady. "The others like me. We can't just let these aliens control us." Liam nodded, a determined look in his eyes. "Then let's build an army." Ethan and Liam worked tirelessly, their efforts rewarded as they found others like themselves, individuals whose lives had been upended by abilities they didn't understand. First was Sophia Chen, a quiet, brilliant biologist who could manipulate her body at the cellular level. When Ethan and Liam met her, she was hiding in a cramped lab, buried beneath research notes and old, hastily packed boxes. She was skeptical at first, reluctant to believe Ethan's story of alien manipulation. But after some prodding, she agreed to come with them. Her scientific curiosity piqued. Then came Marcus, a soft-spoken artist with the unsettling power of telekinesis. He kept mostly to himself, haunted by his newfound ability to move objects without touching them. Each person they found came with their own story, their own burden to bear. Some had already suspected the truth, while others were horrified by the idea that they were part of an alien experiment. 22. As their numbers grew, so did their resolve. What had started as Ethan's quest for answers had transformed into a collective mission, to resist the alien influence that threatened their freedom. Together, they formed an alliance, meeting in secret, training to hone their abilities. Underneath it all, however, was the knowledge that they were woefully outmatched. Dr. Voss and his people had resources, technology, and a plan that spanned decades, if not longer. Ethan's powers continued to develop, his control over time sharpening with each practice session. What had once been chaotic, instinctual bursts became something he could call upon almost at will. He could slow time for a few precious seconds, creating a bubble around himself and anyone close to him, giving his team the advantage they needed to escape or to strike with precision. But he soon learned there were limits. The strain of holding time still, even for a moment, left him drained and disoriented, and he knew that pushing himself too far could be deadly. One evening, after an exhausting training session, Ethan found Sophia in the lab they'd converted into a makeshift base. She was studying a sequence of DNA on a computer screen, her face drawn with concentration. "Sophia," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. She looked up, her expression weary but determined. "Ethan," she said, offering a faint smile. "I think I've found something." She gestured for him to come closer, pointing at a series of markers on the screen. These genetic modifications, they're designed to be dormant, activated only under specific conditions. It's almost as if the aliens planted these traits, waiting for the right moment to awaken them. Ethan frowned, studying the lines of code he could barely understand. "So they've been watching us this whole time, waiting for these abilities to surface?" Sophia nodded grimly. "And controlling the activation process. This isn't natural evolution, it's a calculated design. They want us to feel like we're progressing, but they're pulling the strings." Ethan clenched his fists, anger simmering beneath the surface. "Then we need to find a way to break free of it, to shut down whatever's controlling us." Sophia hesitated, glancing over her shoulder to make sure no one else was listening. There may be a way. But it's risky. Dr. Voss, he hinted at a transmitter, something that could amplify their control over us. If we destroy it, we might be able to sever their influence. The weight of her words hung in the air. Destroying the transmitter would mean a full-scale assault on an alien-controlled facility, an operation that could easily end in disaster. But if they succeeded, they could finally break free. As they shared a silent understanding, Liam approached, his eyes alight with determination. So, when do we go in? Ethan took a deep breath, looking between Liam and Sophia, the gravity of their decision settling heavily on his shoulders. We go in as soon as we're ready. This might be our only chance. 2 nights later, the group stood gathered around a rough map of the alien facility, the dim light casting long shadows over their faces. Ethan went over the plan one final time, his voice steady despite the nerves gnawing at him. We move quickly, stay together, he said. I'll create a time bubble when we get close to the transmitter, but we have to be fast. We only get one shot at this. Liam and Marcus nodded, their faces hardened with resolve. Sophia took a deep breath, clutching a small vial of serum she'd created, a last-ditch attempt to strengthen her own abilities if things went south. With everything set, they moved out, slipping through the quiet streets under the cover of darkness. The alien facility loomed ahead, its silhouette cutting against the night sky, an imposing reminder of the forces they were up against. Ethan's heart pounded as they approached the main entrance, his senses heightened by the anticipation of what lay ahead. They encountered the first line of security guards just outside the building, a mix of humans and aliens, patrolling in pairs. With a nod to Liam, Ethan concentrated, drawing on the energy within him. The world slowed around them, the guards' movements becoming sluggish as if they were wading through molasses. In this bubble of frozen time, Ethan signaled to his team, and they moved past the guards undetected, slipping into the facility. Inside, the sterile, metallic corridors stretched out before them, the air thick with an unnatural stillness. They advanced in silence, their footsteps barely making a sound. But as they rounded a corner, an alarm blared, piercing the quiet and shattering any hope of a stealthy approach. Go, go! Ethan shouted, pushing his powers to the limit as more guards flooded the hallways. Time slowed once again, allowing his team to evade the initial wave, but he knew he couldn't hold it for long. They needed to reach the transmitter, fast. With each step, Ethan's control wavered, his vision blurring as the strain of maintaining the time bubble took its toll. Sophia pressed ahead, her shape-shifting abilities allowing her to slip past guards and disable security systems, while Liam and Marcus held off their pursuers with a mixture of strength and telekinesis. Finally, they reached the heart of the facility, a cavernous chamber housing a towering structure of pulsing energy. The transmitter. It hummed with power, a low vibration that seemed to resonate with Ethan's very bones. Sophia's voice cut through the haze of exhaustion clouding his mind. Ethan, we need to destroy it now, before they reinforce. Ethan nodded, steadying himself as he extended a hand toward the transmitter, gathering the last of his strength. But before he could act, a familiar voice echoed through the chamber. Well, well. I'm impressed, Ethan. Dr. Voss stepped into view, flanked by a squad of alien guards. His expression was calm, almost amused, as he surveyed the group with a mixture of disdain and curiosity. Ethan felt his stomach twist, but he held his ground, meeting Voss's gaze with defiance. You're not going to win, Voss. We're not your experiments. Voss chuckled, shaking his head. Oh, Ethan. You misunderstand. This isn't about winning or losing, it's about progress. Humanity will evolve, whether you're ready for it or not. And I'm merely here to ensure that process goes smoothly. You call this evolution? Ethan spat, gesturing to the transmitter. All you're doing is creating slaves. Perspective, my boy, Voss replied, his tone as condescending as ever. Evolution is simply a means of control. It's all about guiding humanity toward a future where survival and order prevail. Unfortunately, it appears that you, and your little rebellion don't share that vision. Without warning, Voss raised a device in his hand, pressing a button. The transmitter surged with energy, casting an intense glow that filled the chamber. Ethan staggered, a wave of nausea crashing over him as his powers sputtered. Weakened by the transmitter's influence, the rest of the team faltered as well, their abilities dimming under the transmitter's oppressive force. Sophia fell to her knees, clutching her head as if fighting an internal battle. Liam struggled to keep his footing, his enhanced reflexes dulled, while Marcus could only watch helplessly as objects slipped from his telekinetic grasp. But despite the pain and the weight of defeat pressing down on him, Ethan forced himself to stand. He clenched his fists, summoning every ounce of defiance within him. No, he whispered, his voice barely audible over the hum of the transmitter. We're stronger than this. In a final act of desperation, he focused on the energy within him, reaching deeper than he ever had before. The world slowed once again, and he felt a surge of power, raw and wild, coursing through his veins. Ignoring the agony tearing at his body, he took a step forward, each movement like pushing through solid rock. With a roar, he launched himself at the transmitter, plunging his hand into its core. The energy burned him, searing through his flesh, but he didn't stop. He poured everything he had into disrupting the machine, channeling his time manipulation abilities into the device. The transmitter shuddered, sparks flying as its systems began to overload. Alarms blared, and the aliens scrambled, their once calm demeanor replaced by panic. Dr. Voss watched in shock, a flicker of fear crossing his face as he realized the transmitter was about to go critical. Ethan released the device, stumbling back as it crackled and surged with unstable energy. In one final, deafening explosion, the transmitter shattered, sending a shockwave through the facility. The oppressive weight vanished, and Ethan collapsed to the ground, his vision dimming as exhaustion claimed him. The last thing he saw before darkness took him was the look of pure rage on Voss's face, a look that promised retribution. When Ethan awoke, he was back in the makeshift lab, surrounded by his friends. Sophia sat nearby, her eyes filled with relief and worry as she reached out to steady him. You did it, she said softly. The transmitter's destroyed. They can't control us anymore. Ethan managed a weak smile, the pain in his body a reminder of the battle they'd won. But even as he lay there, he knew their fight wasn't over. They had won this battle, but the war against Voss and his alien kind was only beginning. With renewed determination, he looked at his team, the people who had fought beside him, who had risked everything to claim their freedom. They had faced unimaginable odds and come out stronger, bound by a purpose that transcended their individual powers. Then let's get ready, he said, his voice hoarse but resolute. Because they'll be back. And next time, we'll be ready for them.